Hello, and today we are going to be taking a look at making a more accurate Lego Venator model. Um, and as you can see, I've got the Imperial Light Star Cruiser. I think that's what it's called. Moff Gideon's ship from The Mandalorian. And the only real reason why I've got it is because it's such a similar profile to the Venator. And so I think that hopefully I should be able to turn the Venator, turn more so the Imperial Light Cruiser uh, into a Venator. But before we do that, because I will have to take the Venator apart to do that, um, let's go ahead and take a look at the Venator model and give you some of my thoughts on it. So, taking a look here at sort of the side profile of the Lego Venator model, um, you can see that it is quite thick, I suppose. There we go. Hopefully that's a better angle to show off how thick the model is, as well as if you can see up front here, um, you've got a lot of exposed Technic brick and even just exposed space in general. And then even in the back, they did try to accomplish some covering of the gaps, but they still left quite a few gaps. And if we go ahead and take a look up here, you can see more gaps in between sort of where the bridge starts and the wing, I guess, or the main body of the ship ends. We'll go ahead and take a look from another angle. So this is what the ship looks like from the rear, and it's not complete. I do not have that back section for the middle right there, but I'm sure it would look a little better. To be generous to the set, I'm sure it would look better with that. However, you can still see on the sides that they've got those large gaps, and so that's something that I'm gonna try to avoid when converting the Imperial Light Cruiser into a Venator. You can see here, looking at the Imperial Light Cruiser, that its side profile is a lot narrower when compared to the Venator, as well as it doesn't have nearly as much exposed Technic alongside it. So I think it's a good starting place. The only real concern that I have is this back section. This is where I think the majority of my work is going to be cut out for me. In that I have to move the bridge back, which is going to be a little difficult considering that is the sort of Technic inner structure of the Imperial Light Cruiser is built up into the bridge so that you can use the bridge as a handle. So I'm going to have to change that. A, so that it's farther back, but also B, so that it has the dual bridge design from the Venator. And then on the back here, I'm going to have to find a way of taking these two sort of angles here and actually tilting them to be at a slope rather than being flat how they are. And so that might be a little tricky, but ultimately I'm excited to figure out how I can do this, and hopefully I'll end up with a very good looking Venator model, and well, we'll see. Well, here we are. This is pretty much the finished model, or at least I'm at a point where I'm happy with this model. I think there are definitely parts that could be improved, particularly these sections here. In the middle, I think that's where the old Imperial Light Cruiser build shines through the most, is that middle core section there. I didn't really want to tear that apart too much because it worked so well as a core for that middle there, or the front of the ship. And we'll take a look at it from several different angles to give you a better idea of how the ship looks. But just quickly for comparison, we'll take our clone trooper there and just stand him next to the Venator. And you can see that it is still quite big. However, I wanted it to be more of a play scale, rather than like a UCS scale, which we may be getting later this year. And I mean, that's cool for people who like that, but unless it's got like a really killer interior, I really think I'm not gonna pick it up. I don't have any of the UCS Star Destroyers, particularly because of that same reason, where for me it just seems really big and it seems like it would take up a lot of space. And if I'm just looking for a model to look at, I think I'm fine with going a bit smaller. And so I think I'm pretty satisfied with this ship, but let's go ahead and we'll take a look at some of the other angles, and I'll show you what I did, and we'll see how it turned out. So taking a top-down look at the ship, I think it came out pretty alright. I particularly like how well the center stripe was able to be incorporated, as well as the large stickers from the original Venator. Those pieces were able to be incorporated really easily by simply removing the guns on the light cruiser. It gave you perfect space to put in that 6x6 tile. The opening here at the front, I sort of just left there because of the fact that many of the reference images for the Venator have an opening port right there. And so it was relatively easy to just sort of add a bit to the front and then add a bit to the bottom. Then that was able to seal off real easy. You can see at the top here that I did manage to still include that dual bridge design. And for the most part, it's the same build from the original Venator, though I switched out the studs for tiles. there. I think it gives it a more cohesive look. It's kind of hard at that small scale, but one thing that the original Venator did quite well, that I really appreciate, is using this piece here up at the top, that 2x2 by 2/3 brick with the 3 curves on it. It's a really intricate piece, but especially at this small scale, I think it accomplishes quite a bit in the way that it is molded, I guess, the shape that it takes. So just sort of while we're here, I put on some trans medium blue tiles or grate pieces. In a lot of the reference images that I saw, there were sort of lights from different rooms and balconies going all the way up each of the bridges, and so I wanted to try to incorporate that, and I thought that those great pieces, I thought they worked out pretty well for that. And then you can see the gun designs I've only slightly modified from the original Venator, being that I added a 2x3 plate on the bottom and then changed the orientation of the guns. And I think that looks pretty good. I could go back through and replace those with dark red equivalents, but I'm not sure on that. I already added dark red to quite a few places that it's not already, and so I wanted to try to not make it seem as though dark red was overtaking it, but obviously those are all things that I could go in and change later. So taking a look here at the side underneath the guns, I wanted to add in that little side port, and I used these satin trans blue Nexonite shield pieces, and I think they accomplished that goal pretty well. I did use light bluish gray behind them, though I think I may change that out for maybe a light aqua, just something to give it more of a pop than what it has now. I also added on, I know they're inaccurate, but as I was taking apart the original Venator, I thought these builds were really cool, and so I wanted to try and incorporate them in some way, and so I added on the dual turret on each side from the original Venator. They are quite stiff, but I think that looks fine. And obviously you can have them all the way down and out of the way. And then this was probably the most challenging part of the build, where I had figured out the top and I had gotten that to slope down how I wanted it to, but covering this gap, I was really unsure of how I was going to do that. But then I decided to reincorporate a building technique that the original Venator used. The original Venator used sort of this wing build here out of wedge pieces and attached that to the top panel, and because of how it is, it mostly lines up with that curve on the bottom, and I thought that was pretty neat, and it ended up being or working out pretty well for my purposes. And unfortunately, this top section does not really open up very well. I mean, it can open up to there, but as far as any interior space, you're really not going to get a whole lot out of this. The front is still fairly able to open, though it's just the interior from the Imperial Light Cruiser. I didn't really modify that too much. And so we'll go ahead and we'll take a look here at the back of the ship. I'll show you how that turned out. Now, here on the back of the ship, I think I was able to pretty well accomplish that sort of back slope that comes almost in between the different engines. I also think I was able to salvaging most of the engine builds from the original Venator. I was able to pretty faithfully create or recreate the engines on the back of a Venator, though I did change out the exhaust pieces on particularly these 3 engines on each side. Doing that made it more distinguishable as to the different sizes of engine, whereas on the original model, this used a stud, this used a stud, and then both of these used 2x2 brick. It didn't really give off the impression that particularly this engine was bigger than that. But I think that came out all right. And then I was able to attach some wedge pieces and some plates on the sides to cover up those gaps. And I think I did a pretty good job at covering all of the gaps on this. Now, there still are plenty, particularly like right here in the side. You can see that just goes all the way through, and that's something that I could go back and try and mess around with, but I think for my shelf it's gonna be fine. One of the downsides of this modification slash combination model, I guess, while I was able to keep most of the handle build that went into the Imperial Light Cruiser bridge, now, unfortunately, it's off of the center balance, which I could add a whole bunch of weight in the back to potentially fix that. But as you can see right now, if I pick it up, it just sort of leans all the way to the front. And that's not really what we want. And so I think it does a good job of creating a space for the bridge, or the dual bridge. But as far as a carrying handle goes, it's not great. However, the model is still really easy to simply pick up from the bottom. And from there, you can carry it around. But ultimately, it's mostly just gonna sit on a shelf for me. But I really like the model. We'll go ahead and turn it around and sort of give you a full view of it. So you can see the model here in all of its glory. I think it does really well capture that Venator design, and I think I was able to accomplish my main goal, which was to make a much slimmer design for the Venator, whereas the Lego model was quite thick in the middle section. I think mapping this onto the Imperial Light Cruiser body really captures sort of the sleek design of the Venator class Star Destroyer. But that's pretty much all I really have to say about this. At some point, I would like to start doing studio tour videos, and I think I'll go through shelf by shelf. So eventually I will let you know how this goes on my shelf. But before then, you may be able to spot it in the background of some other videos, and yeah, just be on the lookout, I guess, if you want to see more of it. But that's really all I have for today. So thanks again, and bye bye. Dong, 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 no, 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 no. I think I did it right that time.